I'm Eddie 35, civil engineer, quiet by nature, loyal to a fault. Or so I've been told. I've always believed that if you do the right things, love the right way, and stay true, life works out the way it's supposed to. I also used to believe my marriage was solid. That morning started off so mundane, it almost feels surreal thinking back on it now. I had a late client meeting scheduled on the other side of town. So instead of rushing out of the house, I took my time getting dressed. Lena had already left for work by the time I came downstairs. No kiss goodbye, just the sound of the front door clicking shut, and her heels tapping down the walkway. I stood in the kitchen for a moment staring at the half-empty coffee pot. She'd left behind. It was a little thing, but it bugged me. We used to make breakfast together now. She left the pot running and bolted. No note, no smile, no nothing. I figured I'd KL some time and grab coffee near her firm. There's this small cafe she always mentioned, said the espresso was strong, and the lighting made her sketches look like art. I'd never been inside even though I'd driven by it 100 times. It seemed like the kind of place you visit when you have time to slow down. And we hadn't done much of that lately. When I walked in, the warmth hit me first. Not just from the heater kicking under the window, but the coziness of it all, the wood tones, the chalkboard, menus, the soft indie playlist, humming in the background, the kind of cafe where people brought laptops and stayed for hours. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner by the frosted window, half hidden behind a potted fig tree. I pulled out my phone to review my presentation notes, thinking I'd spend 20 minutes max before heading out. 10 minutes and the bell above the door jingled. I looked up more out of habit than anything else, and there she was, Lena, my wife. She walked in with three co-workers laughing about something, her voice soft, but animated in that way I hadn't heard in a long time. She looked great, hair pinned back, red lipstick, that navy blazer that always brought out the blue in her eyes. It was the same one she wore the night I proposed. She didn't see me. They sat one table over, close enough that I could hear snippets of conversation, but not so close that it felt intentional. I was boxed in by a wall and a bookshelf filled with used paperbacks, so even if I wanted to get up and leave without catching her attention, I'd have to walk past her. And something held me in place, maybe curiosity, maybe something darker. She looked happy. Not just fake it for work happy, she was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes lit up, her shoulders were relaxed. She was smiling without effort, and it hit me like a punch to the gut, because I couldn't remember the last time she looked like that. When she was with me, I was just about to stand, thinking I'd surprise her and say a quick hello, maybe bring her a coffee refill as a sweet gesture, when I heard it. A man's voice, confident, borderline flirty. You light up when you're around Grayson. Your husband must be jealous, huh? It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for me to catch every syllable. I felt my heart hiccup in my chest. Lena's laugh followed, not forced, not awkward, but soft, familiar. Then she said something I'll never forget. I can still hear the exact cadence in my head. Stephen doesn't get jealous. He doesn't even notice I'm not really his wife anymore. I froze completely, and utterly froze, coffee halfway to my mouth, my hand trembling. I stared down at the table, suddenly hyper aware of everything. My breath, the heat from the mug, the tightness in my chest. Her words repeated themselves in my mind over and over again, until they didn't sound like words anymore, just noise pounding through my skull. Not really his wife anymore. What did that mean? Was it metaphor? Some poetic way of saying we'd grown apart? Or was it literal? The man responded something about her needing to take what she deserves, but I didn't hear the rest. My blood was rushing too loud in my ears. The world around me blurred, voices became muffled. Faces indistinct. I couldn't think straight, couldn't move. I just sat there like a statue, watching her laugh and nod and sip her latte like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just cracked my world in half with a sentence that wasn't even meant for me. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe it was 5 minutes, maybe it was 30. All I remember is this strange sense of disconnect, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life, someone whose wife just casually implied to another man that she'd emotionally checked out of her marriage. And no one noticed. Eventually, I stood, my legs felt like lead. I walked out slowly, trying not to look in her direction. But I glanced once, just once, and caught her smiling at the man across from her like. He'd told the funniest joke in the world. She hadn't smiled at me like that in months, maybe years. I stepped out into the cold. The wind hit my face like a slap, my coffee spilled a little over my hand. But I barely felt it. The sidewalk buzzed with people, students, professionals, couples, strangers. But I felt like I was underwater. Every sound was distant, every thought was sharp. I don't even remember walking back to my car. I must have driven home. But it's a blur. The only thing I remember with any clarity is that voice in my head, the one that kept repeating her words like a twisted mantra. He doesn't even notice I'm not really his wife anymore, and the worst part, she was right. After that morning in the cafe, something in me shifted. I didn't tell Lena I had seen her. I didn't bring it up that night or the next morning or the one after that. I wasn't ready to hear. Whatever explanation she might have offered, or worse, the lies she'd probably try to feed me. So instead, I did what I've always done. I waited, I watched. And I started seeing everything I had ignored before. It's funny how your brain can filter out red flags when your heart is still clinging to the image of someone who doesn't exist anymore. All the moments I brushed off as busy season at work, or she's just tired, suddenly came back with a vengeance, rewritten in sharper focus like the new password on her phone. We never had secrets like that. I wasn't the type to go through her messages, and she knew that. But a couple of weeks ago, when her phone lit up on the nightstand, I reached over to check who had texted. Out of reflex more than anything else, that's when I saw it, a new lock screen, numbers instead of the old pattern. We both knew. When I asked her about it later, she said something vague like it's just safer with all the data breaches going around. She said it casually, smiling as she folded laundry, but she wouldn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push. Not then. Then there were the work calls. They started coming in later and later, sometimes 9, 10, even 11 at night. She'd be in bed next to me scrolling or half asleep. And suddenly she'd jump up and say, "I need to take this, sorry, client issue." She'd grab her phone and head straight to the bathroom, closing the door behind her. First, I told myself it was just her job. Architecture firms run late sometimes. Clients can be demanding. But the way she whispered into the phone, the soft tone, the laugh I could barely hear through the wall, that wasn't how she talked to clients. One night, I stood outside the bathroom door. I don't even know why. I just stood there like an idiot in my own house, listening to my wife whisper sweet nothings. I wasn't supposed to hear. The water wasn't running. There was no toilet flush. Just a voice I didn't recognize anymore. And when she came out 20 minutes later, her smile was gone. Her eyes darted past me. She said something about project delays, and went straight to bed. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more signs I'd let slip by. The affection stopped next, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a leak in a pipe behind a wall. You don't notice it until the damage is already done. No more kisses goodbye in the morning, no more hand on my arm. When she left, no more absent-minded fingers brushing mine. When we stood at the sink together, just absence. And then, there were the smells. One morning, I leaned in to hug her before she left for work, trying to test the waters, trying to feel close to her again, and caught a whiff of something that stopped me cold. Cologne, not mine. It was musky, darker, almost spicy. "I don't wear anything like that, haven't in years," she said. "Oh, must be from the sample guys at work," and laughed it off like it was nothing. But she turned away as she said it. She always turned away now. After that, it was the little things, weird groceries in the fridge, things I hated: cilantro, hummus, blood, orange sparkling water. Some kind of protein bar that tasted like dirt. I asked her once, "Did you mean to buy this?" And she smiled and said, "Oh, someone at work recommended it, thought I'd try something new." She kept forgetting things, two important things: a dinner we were supposed to have with my sister, a weekend getaway we'd planned back in February. She looked at me blankly when I brought it up, like I'd dreamed it. Like I was background noise, and maybe I was. Maybe I'd become that guy, the invisible husband, the one she didn't really see anymore, the one she talked about in coffee shops when she thought he wasn't listening. The final straw, though, the moment I felt something inside me harden, came via text. It was a Tuesday. I had sent her a message around 5 asking if she wanted me to pick up dinner or cook something at home. Normally, even on her busiest days, she'd shoot back a thumbs up or a quick whatever's easiest. But this time, her reply came nearly an hour later. It said, "I'll be late tonight, tight schedule. Can't break away, no hey babe, no smiley face, no sign." Off just those four cold clipped sentences, it read like a meme. Like something a boss would send a colleague, formal, distant, sterile. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I stared at the wall, then at the wedding photo, still hanging by the door, the one where she's laughing eyes, crinkled head, tilted back into my chest. That girl was gone, had been for a while. And I was done pretending otherwise. That night I sat on the edge of our bed, while she showered. I looked around our room, and everything suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a hotel you've stayed in too long. The photos, the lotion on the nightstand, her robe hanging behind the door, all of it felt like it belonged to someone else's life, someone else's wife. And I didn't know her anymore. There comes a point when suspicion turns into obsession. After that cold corporate-sounding text, I couldn't sit still anymore. Every part of me was on edge, wired, tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it wasn't just doubt anymore, it was dread, a quiet, persistent voice in the back of my mind, whispering, "You already know. You just haven't seen it yet." So I stopped pretending. I started checking her location history on our shared Google account, something I hadn't even realized we still had synced. Until I went digging. Most nights it matched her story, office, gym, home. But Thursday night something weird popped up: the office, then a park, then something called Elevate Yoga Collective at 8:43 p.m. She'd never mentioned a yoga class. Not once, and it wasn't close to her work either. It was tucked in this residential part of the city where parking is hell, and nothing's open late. When I looked up the place, it billed itself as a private reservation-only wellness space. That same night, she came home around 10:30, hair slightly damp, leggings on her face flushed. She kissed my cheek and said sorry. We had to pull an all-nighter to finish the renderings. That was it. I didn't sleep much. The next day I left work early under the excuse of a dentist appointment. Lena had texted around noon, "Staying late tonight, last-minute deadline. Don't wait up." I waited, not at home, not like before. I drove across town and parked 2 blocks from her office. I didn't want to be seen. I sat in the car, engine off, fingers tapping against the steering wheel. As the minutes dragged by, at 7:11 p.m., the lights in the building started going out one by one. People trickled into the parking lot. I scanned each person. No Lena. By 7:30, her car was still there, parked neatly in her usual spot. By 8 o'clock, she still hadn't come out. But I was no longer convinced. She was inside. At 8:17, her car pulled out of the lot. I ducked low as it passed, then pulled out slowly, and followed from a few car lengths behind. She wasn't headed home. She drove across town, weaving through traffic with that calm familiarity that comes from doing something more than once. I already knew where she was going. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I knew when she turned onto the street with the yoga studio. My stomach dropped. She pulled into the tiny private lot beside the building and parked. There were only a handful of cars. The sign above the entrance was small and dim, but I could make out the words Elevate Yoga Collective, just like on the map. She got out, adjusted her ponytail, slung a bag over her shoulder, and walked to the door. I waited 5 minutes. Then I followed. I parked farther down, out of view, and walked up the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. The place had these big glass windows at the front, frosted about halfway up, with sheer curtains hanging loosely behind. From the right angle you could see straight into the back room. I crossed at the corner, heart pounding, and angled toward the side of the building, and that's when I saw them through a gap in the curtain. Lena and a man. She was laughing. Her hands were on his chest. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, or 6 feet 3 inches, fit, with dark hair pulled back into a short bun, wearing athletic gear like he belonged there. His hand was on her waist. They were standing close, closer than I'd ever seen her stand with anyone who wasn't me. And then she kissed him, slow, certain, not a peck, not a slip-up. A kiss filled with history, and he kissed her back. My entire body went cold, like my blood had stopped moving, couldn't look away. She leaned into him, smiling like a teenager. She looked alive, radiant, like someone I used to know, like someone who had forgotten I even existed. And I just stood there, could have kicked the door open, could have screamed, I could have marched in and demanded answers, but I didn't. Couldn't instead I turned around, walked back to my car like a robot, and drove nowhere in particular, just away. I didn't cry, not then. I was too numb. You think when it happens, when you see it with your own eyes, you'll fall apart, that you'll crumble. But that wasn't my reaction. It was quieter than that, more sinister, like someone had pulled a plug deep inside me, and all the feeling had drained out. I got home around 11, sat in the dark for a while. Her side of the bed was empty. When I walked into the bedroom, I stared at her pillow, at the indentation. Her head left behind every night, at the blanket folded perfectly over her side. When she came home, 15 minutes later, she was all smiles again, said she was starving, asked if we had any leftover pasta. I said I'd already eaten. She kissed my forehead like it was nothing, and went to wash up. I watched her disappear down the hallway, and I realized I didn't need a confrontation. Not yet. I needed a plan. I didn't sleep that night, not out of rage, not even heartbreak. What kept me awake was the clarity, a brutal, surgical kind of clarity that only comes after you've seen the truth with your own eyes. The image of Lena kissing that man, Grayson, I assumed was burned into my mind. But I didn't flinch when I saw it in my head. I didn't cry, didn't shake. I just recalibrated. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I was going to do. Lena loved blueberry muffins. Not just any specifically, the ones from Dottie's, the bakery near our place. She swore they were better than any brunch spot in the city. Said they made her feel spoiled, like a little treat before a stressful day. I had bought them for her 100 times before, so that morning I got up early, drove to Dottie's, and bought one. When I got home, I placed it on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it the moment she walked in. Next to it, I left a simple note on a yellow post-it. Last night's yoga looked interesting. That was it. No accusations, no name, no threat, just truth wrapped in politeness. Then I left for work. All day my phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls, not from her. At least I half expected a flood of messages, explanations, denials, maybe even silence stretched into cowardice. But Lena didn't flinch, not digitally anyway. It wasn't until I came home that I got the reaction. She was already on the couch when I walked in, arms folded, face blank. She looked up like she'd been waiting all day, her body so still. It looked posed. Hey, she said, like it was a normal day. I didn't answer. I just hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat down across from her. Silence, the kind that hums, that presses into your ears until you want to scream just to break it. She couldn't take it. I saw your note, she said finally, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. I nodded, still silent. You've been following me, she asked. I let the words settle, let her feel the weight of her own accusation. No, I said, just saw what was already there. She looked down for a second, then back up, her eyes searching mine for something: anger, heartbreak, softness, anything. There was none left. Who told you? That made me laugh. Actually laugh, the kind that's sharp and bitter and hollow. I watched you, Lena, through the glass, through that damn curtain. You weren't hiding, you didn't even try. She flinched at that, and for a second I thought she might break down, but she didn't. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled like she was letting go of something. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Sure you did, it just got out of hand. I was unhappy, Eddie. We've been off for a long time, and you know it. Unhappy, I swear. If I had $1 for every time someone cheated and used that word as a shield, I could have retired early and never heard this conversation at all. You could have talked to me, I said. You could have told me something was broken. I tried, she snapped. But you never heard me. You were always in your own head. That landed harder than I expected, because there was some truth in it. I did bury myself in work. Sometimes I did coast through our routine, assuming she was fine, because she wasn't crying in the hallway. But that didn't excuse what she did. It didn't even come close. I hear you now, I said. So tell me the truth. She hesitated. Then she looked straight at me and said it. It's not just him. I blinked slowly. What? Her eyes welled up, but she didn't look away. It wasn't just Grayson. I felt the room tilt for a second. It was like I lost gravity. You're kidding, I said. You're seriously telling me you've been with what, multiple people? Is this supposed to make me feel better? At least she wasn't emotionally attached. What kind of logic is that? I'm telling you, she said quietly, because you asked for the truth. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, not because I needed anything, but because I needed distant space. I gripped the edge of the sink and stared out the window into the dark, into the nothing. The words wouldn't stop repeating in my head. It's not just him. I turned back to her hands on the counter. How many? I asked. She shook her head. Don't do that. How many, Lena? More silence. I don't know. That's when something inside me just shut off, not snapped, not broke, just flipped like a breaker switch being turned off in a part of me I didn't even know existed. I wasn't in pain anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was done. I walked past her and into our room, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and started packing clothes, laptop, chargers. I didn't say anything, didn't rush. Just moved with that eerie calm people get in the eye of a storm. You're leaving? She asked, still sitting on the couch. Not forever, I said, but for now. Where are you going? Away from you. She didn't follow me, didn't plead. She just sat there, legs pulled up, face buried in her hands. I walked out without another word. I drove to my friend Nate's place, crashed on his couch. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and turned on the game. That night, lying on a stranger's throw pillow, I realized something strange. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I moved in with Nate that night and figured I'd be there maybe a week, two max, just enough time to catch my breath, to figure out how to get through a conversation with a divorce attorney without choking on my own rage. I didn't have a plan, yet I just needed space. Nate gave it to me. He didn't press me for details, didn't try to drag the story out of me over beers and sports highlights. He just said, bedroom's yours, mi casa, etc. And that was that. He knew, and that was enough. The next few days passed in a haze. I worked remotely, called in sick a few times, just to avoid the pitying looks at the office. Lena texted once or twice, short, vague things like, can we talk soon? Or, I know this is hard, I want to explain everything. I left her on read. I didn't want explanations. I wanted distance. I wanted truth. But truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not looking. It started with a bank alert. I had signed into our joint account late one night, mostly to check how much longer I could live off it before I'd need to split funds. The numbers didn't look right. I hadn't spent much since moving out. Nate was covering groceries, and I was eating like a college kid again, ramen and protein bars. But the balance was low, way lower than it should have been. I clicked through the statements and saw it over $12,000 gone, not in one big transaction, not something obvious like a shopping spree or a sudden vacation. It was in pieces. $180 here, $250 there, a few $600 withdrawals, labeled as consulting fee or design service retainer, small enough to slip under most people's radar. But when you added it up, $1,248,794 over the last 6 weeks, and almost every single one was labeled as transferred to a personal project fund or independent design trust. My stomach dropped. I opened a spreadsheet and started matching dates. The transactions lined up suspiciously well with the times she'd been working late or out with the team or crashing after yoga. Every withdrawal was methodical, spread out, calculated. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, this was theft. It got worse. I checked my email later that night, mostly just clearing out junk, when I saw something odd, a confirmation email from a company I'd never heard of, some boutique consulting agency. The subject line read, "Welcome to RVM Talent Solutions Contract, approved." The sender was a real person, not automated. It even had my name in the opening line. I almost deleted it as spam, until I scrolled down. Attached was a PDF contract with my signature. Except I never signed anything. It was a freelance consultant agreement for design advisory services, listing me as the primary expert for sustainable infrastructure. It included dates, compensation, and billing info linked to our shared bank account. But the email address on the contact line wasn't mine. It was Lena's, not just her name, it was her domain. She had created an alias for me, fabricated credentials, claimed she was leveraging our household expertise as part of a pitch for a new sustainability project she'd supposedly been spearheading with her firm's private partners. I read the contract 3 times, my eyes burning. By the end, she had used my resume, copied entire paragraphs from my LinkedIn. She even included my license number, my real one. I found it buried in the document header. That's when it hit me. She'd built herself a new pitch persona, using me as the foundation, all to impress someone else, or maybe to make herself look like She could offer more than she actually could. Whatever it was, she forged my name, sold my credentials, and siphoned thousands from our account to bankroll the lie. I sat there staring at the screen, my jaw clenched so tight. It started to ache. I wanted to scream. But instead I hit print. Every document, every contract, every transfer. I printed them all and stacked them neatly into a binder. The next morning, I took the binder and drove to the bank, sat down with a manager, and walked through every suspicious withdrawal. They opened a fraud inquiry, took notes, asked questions, took it very seriously. When I told them one of the accounts the money was funneled into was under my name, but I hadn't opened it, then I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer. Savannah Hart. Savannah was a friend of a friend. I remembered her from a barbecue once, quiet, sharp, the kind of person who could slice someone apart with her words and make them thank her for it. Nate said she had represented his cousin in a brutal custody battle and left the other side reeling. I emailed her the documents. She called me back 20 minutes later. Eddie, she said, calm and focused, you're not in a marriage, you're in a con. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, Savannah started assembling everything we needed to prepare for divorce proceedings: financial statements, evidence of fraud, the forged contract. She said the best way to take control was to move quickly before Lena caught wind of what I was building. She also told me something I hadn't considered: she's not just lying to you, she's lying to whoever she's working with now. If they ever find out she misused credentials, forged documents, used a fraudulent consultant profile. She's finished. That night, I looked at our wedding photo again, one I still hadn't taken out of my bag when I left, and I felt nothing, not sadness, not longing, just exhaustion. Lena hadn't just cheated on me emotionally or physically. She had emptied me like an account, piece by piece, lie by lie, and now I was going to do what I should have done the moment I heard her laugh in that cafe close the account. Savannah didn't waste time. Within days, we filed a restraining order on the joint accounts and froze all assets. Lena hadn't noticed, yet she was too busy playing house with her new life. But I wanted more than legal action. I wanted truth to cost her something real. I did some digging, found the guy from the yoga studio, Grayson. He had a public Instagram, sloppy. He posted about a charity gala with my incredible wife, Lynn. Bingo, I said.